You are watching Channel Africa Conversations.
The first generation of leaders after decolonization, the late 50s and the early 60s, were straightforward that we have liberated the masses and then we are relinquishing power.
When you look at leaders that did things right, for example, like Julius Nyerere, leaving power right in time.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Now, today, one of the most persistent challenges facing Africa's political landscape is the question of longevity in office. Why do so many leaders stay in power for decades, often well beyond their original mandates? Well, some argue it's rooted in the liberation struggle era, where ruling parties view leadership as a birthright. Others point to fears of prosecution once leaders step aside. But beyond those explanations, what other forces are at play, and what role do ordinary citizens have in enabling or resisting this trend? Well, to help us unpack these dynamics, we're joined by Professor Chitja Twala from the Department of History at the University of South Africa, and Dr. Alex Kihehere Mukiga, who's the Research Fellow at the Center for Development Support at the University of the Free State. Gentlemen, to both of you, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you very much, Peter, for hosting us.
So I'm going to start with a question for both of you. And I'm just wondering, if you had to explain to a child why African leaders stay in power for so long, what would you say to them? Let me start with you, Dr. Mukiga.
The problem of Africa leaders, I think it goes back in history. Right from colonization, you could see our leaders who were actually part of the colonizers helping to take other Africans into slavery. So after colonization, you remember great leaders like Kwame Nkrumah. I think in his work, when he said Africa must unite, he feared that, after some time, when these liberators get in power and stabilize, they will try to protect the wealth and everything they have gained. And that was actually a worry. And it seems that that's where we have gone. That's why you see most leaders who get in power and they have not really established, the succession plan. You see those countries actually facing challenges. When you look at leaders that did things right, for example, like Julius Nyerere, leaving power right in time, you see other leaders that let power go, and we have example of Kenya, for example, though after that we had people like Arap Moi, but afterwards he also let power go and he never intervened to change the constitution. But other leaders who have been in power for so long and have refused to give away power, we see this trend going, and it has been like that, and we don't see any hope of that changing. So basically, the problem of Africa is we have leadership of poverty, and we have that leadership curse. Remember, leaders that were also good, like Thomas Sankara, were assassinated. You can
Right,
remember
right.
Patrice Lumumba of Congo. He was also taken out by external forces, conniving with internal
Okay.
agents, they manipulate and, yeah. So the problem of Africa is really very huge when it comes to why leaders stay in power. But I think
All
we
right.
we're gonna
I
unpack it.
think you've answered about 10 of my questions now in that one. But let me ask you, Professor Twala, and I really do want a very simple, quick answer, just to set us going. And how do we explain why our leaders choose to stay in power? What's a simple answer to that?
The simple answer to that, Peter, is that there is this saying that in Africa, you don't relinquish power when you are still alive. It is as simple as that. Taking it from there and looking at the whole history is that the first generation of leaders after decolonization, the late 50s and the early 60s, were straightforward that we have liberated the masses and then we are relinquishing power. But this is a new phenomenon now that people go to an extent of changing the constitution to stay in power forever. That is a simple answer, that people think that by leaving or relinquishing power, therefore they'll be doing disservice to their constituencies.
All right. Dr. Mkiga, you mentioned the historical aspect of this, and I want to think and maybe ask, does the issue of how we were organized as Africans traditionally, where we had a chief or a king, play out in the modern times? Because since the beginning of time, we've always revered our leaders almost as if they're deity. Is that a hang-up that we've taken into modern-day leadership?
Uh, I really don't think so, because other countries, they also had kings, when you see like UK, they have their monarchy, there is the king now, but the government does its work. So those are just ceremonial, though they have some powers. But I think Africa, it's a combination of factors. We have the challenge of, greed, and we also have leaders who, because they have amassed wealth through stealing, that is lack of accountability. Sometimes they are scared of leaving power because they don't know whether the next government will come after them, like what happened to El Bashir of Southern
Yeah.
Sudan and
All right.
many
I'm gonna
um,
stop you there because this is more the modern story. I just want to look at the historical realities first, and maybe I come back to you, Professor Twala, because you're a historian yourself. Is there a historical perspective, in your view, to what we're seeing today?
Africans by themselves are respectful people. Therefore, they respect authority. And whether you have traditional leaders or chiefs, they will definitely respect them. And that is why the word of the chief or the word of the king, it is respected by Africans. Therefore, what is happening today is a total different thing, because you find that the very same traditional leaders are submerged under politicians, and that is where the problem lies. But in totality, Africans are respectful people. And then if we can adhere to that, I think the continent will be much better than it is today.
A question for both of you, because we often look to blame someone for our own travails and ills. Did colonization contribute to where we are now? Laws were brought by them, systems of governance were brought by them, a lot of things that were not part of the fabric of our societies came with the colonizers. Is that part of where we are today, Dr. Mugiga?
Yeah, I think partly it's part of where we are today, because I think after colonization, I would say that our colonizers did not actually prepare us for, for a stable transition, like, good governance. But I think that was not part of their plan, because their plan was to continue with this kind of imperialism, where they continue taking our resources. So we can't continue looking up to them and blaming them, saying, um, they did not prepare us, though that was their intention. I think it's now up to Africans to look forward and see what they can really do going forward.
Professor Twala,
It,
do we blame the colonizers?
Historically, yes. It would be naive to divorce what is happening to the continent itself from what was happening during the colonial period. If the colonizers' aim was to give freedom and was to give independence to the African countries, wouldn't be having today as well some of the African countries still paying allegiance to countries like France and Portugal. And the languages that are spoken in those countries are still those colonizers' languages. Therefore, it has got a ripple effect to what is happening today. Therefore, we cannot divorce that from our challenges of today.
Still with you, Professor Twala, you've started that thought. Fast forward to the modern day, we're seeing Francophone countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, divorcing themselves more and more from France. How much influence and work do external players still play in terms of who becomes head of state and who stays head of state in Africa?
Fortunately, 2 weeks ago, I was in Cameroon. And to my surprise, at a hotel, we just asked a waiter a simple question. What do you call a chicken in your own language? And the guy said, it is chicken. Mm. And to me, it was so absurd that you've got your own language, but you say chicken is chicken. But fortunately or unfortunately, we were in the English-speaking Cameroon, not the French-speaking Cameroon. But there is still this subtle war between the two, the English and the French-speaking Cameroonians. And then I was saying to myself, where are the aspirations of the likes of Nkuruma of having a united Africa if a country as small as Cameroon, there are so much divisions? To worsen the matters, all over Buea, where we were, where the University of Buea was, all over there are soldiers in the streets. And to me, it was to say somebody outside is controlling Cameroon and is protecting Cameroon from a takeover by other Cameroonians, because the very same Cameroonians are not united themselves. Therefore, I can give examples of other countries on the African continent, but that to me was actually saying it is a different ball game. I went to another university in Senegal. On arrival at that university, I wanted to meet the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities there. I met with the Dean of the Faculty, and the Dean of the Faculty could not even speak English. I don't say we must promote English, but in that at that university, about 40% of the students are in humanities, but they are French speaking. I had to wait for an hour to get a translator to come and translate my conversation with the Dean of the Faculty. And that shows how deep-rooted the outsiders are still controlling. Thank you.
All right, so Dr. Mukiga, we have the external forces, we've got the historical context, But then we have modern day leaders who are pretty much powers to themselves. Uganda, a country that you know well, President Museveni, when he came into power, he himself said, look, you know, the problem with Africa is leaders that overstay. And he says that I'm not going to be that guy. He became that guy. He's still that guy. And this isn't Britain or America or France telling him to do this. Where does that energy come from?
Yeah, I think, you know, when they overstay in power, which I sometimes think that some leaders, they come with that intention of overstaying in power. But as when they overstay in power, they capture all state institutions from the military. The military is in his hand. You know, he already say that's my money, my oil. You know, so everything belongs to him. You know, so you have weak institutions. You have weak democratic institutions. You know, I think until 1996, Uganda was a one-party a one-party politics, and then they called for the multipartism. He didn't want it, but he accepted it, and but it has not really been a multi-party because it's only him who can move around the country when he's campaigning. Others are just, you know, controlled by the military police, you know, beaten up, their supporters arrested, and, you know, others are abducted. There are those that have been in prison for almost 5 years, and, you know, Kizza Besigye, the person he has been contesting with for almost 4 years, for 4 terms, is now 8 months in prison in Ruzira. So you see, even the judiciary is captured until he says release him. No one can dare do that, not even in court, that you are going to get bail, you know. So these leaders, they capture power, and they weaken all the institution, and everything becomes, you know, they are in their hands. So they now have within their parties, the so-called liberation parties, they have people who are the members, but they are so vulnerable that they keep on looking up to these leaders for promotion, for opportunities, for, you know, something. So it's a very, very tricky situation, and that's the state that they create for them to be able to read forever, you know.
Professor Twala, liberation movements, because I mean, it's a generation and a half by and large, maybe 2 generations. So it's still a very recent history for most of us. Is it that because we fought, we deserve to stay in power, and we can take turns amongst ourselves? And if we have one leader who was alive at the time of liberation, he should be the one to carry on. Is there that liberation movement privilege that persists?
Yeah, and there are many reasons, Peter, to the question of people clinging to power forever. One of the reasons is what I call the psychological and historical factors, the struggle mentality, that some of the leaders, they have internalized the belief that they are the only people who can safeguard the revolution legacy. And that is not true. And that also impacts on the succession plan, that until the leader says there must be a successor. You are not going to have a successor. There are African countries whereby you get a president, but you don't have a deputy president. And those are the problems that we are faced with. The second one, under the psychological and historical factor, it is a question of fear of reversal. You indicated in your prelude that some people don't want to leave power because they are afraid that whatever they did, it might haunt them and they might go to jail. And there is another factor, which one would call a political and economic factor or incentive, that you use your political muscle in order to access state resources, in order to access money. And sometimes it is mind-boggling that I was reading a newspaper that a son of a president, of one of the African president, the son sold a plane which belongs to the state to the private investors. How can a person do that? And those are the questions that we are asking ourselves. And Dr. Alex alluded to a question of weak and suppressed opposition. And if the judiciary is weak, and then this president will go in. For example, Paul Biya changed the constitution in 2008 and dealt away with the terms of office. And if a person has got such absolute power, and then that absolute power, we know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Therefore, if a person has got that absolute power to can go and change the constitution of the country, that I can serve indefinite terms as a leader, then it is problematic. The last one that we also need to check, and we also need to have a deep debate on it, it is this state and party fusion, whereby there is no clear-cut line of the state starts from here to end here, and the party starts from here to end here. Sometimes you get this fusion as if the state is the party and the party is the state, and that is where our problems lie. But until such time that we deal with such problems on the African continent, and also to be clear with the succession plan, we are not going to get it right. We are not going to win it.
Dr. Mukiga, as far as citizens are concerned, how much are we enablers sometimes, and sometimes maybe powerless to cause change? I look at Donald Trump and his support base, and some of the things that he was accused of during the campaign should have actually crippled his campaign. But it's almost as if there's a blind loyalty that no matter what he's done, we'll forgive him and we will make him the president. Do we suffer the same here, where there's some blind loyalty, maybe because of tribe or some other factor, that we just say, yes, we want this guy, even though we know better?
I think I would say they are just victims. They are just victims because actually the people that I would blame are the Airites, because in most cases the Airites don't really participate in these discussions, in these struggles to demand for the transfer of power. So the voters, for them, they just do their best. But I think Airites are not really into it. Because I believe that when you have Airites, those are the people that can actually send the message. Remember, in Africa, the biggest percentage of the population is still staying in rural areas, So you find the incumbents, opposition winning in urban areas. And then when it comes to rural areas, the incumbents win by a large margin, which means the message is actually not really getting into the local people, but also there are so many factors. You can't just look at only that. There are so many factors. You look at the issue of monetizing these campaigns. I mean, who has got money? The opposition, who has got money to at least have every agent at the polling station? You find most parties, they can't afford to have every polling agent at the polling station across the whole country. So then who collects the DR forms? I was lucky to be the presiding officer in 2006 elections, and I saw these dynamics. It's very complicated. So for a candidate to claim that they have won, they have to present the DR forms. So there is always that excitement that the people, of course, they want change, but getting this change, you must tick so many boxes. Make sure you have money to run campaigns. You are also allowed to campaign. As I said, they are not allowed to campaign. The military cramp on them. So when you look at a country like South Africa, you ask yourself, how lucky are these people? Because they have never witnessed what happens in these campaigns.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. Professor Twala, I'm curious now also about sometimes the system is bigger than the individual in power, so that there's a network of, Dr. Mukiga has called it elites, but also I think patronage. There's a grouping of people who the status quo is what is required. Some might say they're lobby groups in the United States that are so powerful that you can't get elected as president without their support. Do we have the same setup in Africa where certain leaders, even if they want to leave, possibly can't because of the system, cartels, patrons, elites, whatever is in place?
Yeah, it is so unfortunate that on the African continent, you don't become a member of a political party, but you become a member of a political party. And that is problematic because you show allegiance to a certain individual by virtue of that individual holding some power in a political space or in a political party. That is problem number one. Problem number two, it is the whole question of the politics of stomach, that people are seeing politics as an easy way to accumulate wealth. Therefore, if you are closer to a person who has got a purse or the country's purse, therefore the chances for you and your family and your beneficiaries to access resources are huge. And that is what we call the politics of the stomach. The third one, it is this obsession on the African continent on the whole issue of struggle credentials. That because as this political party, we are claiming to have rescued you from the colonizers, therefore you owe us for the rest of your lives. And that is problematic. But the solution also lies not only in the political parties, but also in the people who are voting. Because I've witnessed many elections. People are not voting because your manifesto is saying things that they want to hear. But people are voting because they think that you are going to provide what they need, but not because they've read the manifesto, not because of what is on the lamppost. That has nothing to do with people voting for you. But the civic organizations and the grassroots organizations might also assist us in this a quagmire in arresting the situation before it turns ugly even further.
All right, as we start to think about wrapping this conversation up, maybe each of you can help us with what possible scenarios will play out and what might be solutions. And when I say scenarios, I'm thinking about what I saw in Mozambique in the last election. I'm thinking about what I've seen in Nigeria in terms of young people protesting against the state and some of the state's policies. Police brutality. I'm thinking about Kenya, where young people said, listen, this tax is not working for us. I wonder if and then we saw Gabon, family business collapse there. I'm wondering if some of these leaders are misreading the room and that maybe a new era of change is already upon us and that it's going to be led by young people one way or another. Let me start with you, Professor Twala, as you give us your closing thoughts as you look at those questions.
No, I totally agree with you, Peter, that our leaders are still sleeping, and unfortunately sleeping in the middle of a revolution, because a revolution is taking place, but they don't see that a revolution is taking place. The whole question of succession planning is important. If you don't have a succession plan as a ruling party, then it's problematic. The youth activism is on the rise across the continent. And I hope our leaders are taking cue to that, and they are looking at the problem of the youth, unemployment, poverty, and the youth is the answer. And if we don't invest in the youth, then we are doomed as a continent.
And Dr. Mukiga, your closing thoughts, given what I've mentioned to you, is there a movement that's going to change things, or are there other solutions? We didn't even mention the regional bodies, ECOWAS, East African Community, African Union, but I guess, you know, we've seen how ineffectual they are at times, but one does get one does get a sense, though, that young people probably are the ones that are going to change things.
Yeah, certainly, because I think we are sitting on a time bomb, you know. We have so many challenges at the moment. The problem of unemployment is something that really gonna get out of control. And once it does, then there is a very big problem. So we are sitting with uncertainties here. We don't know how things are going to play out. You see, some countries, they have different, I think, context. Because when you look at Uganda, for example, President Museveni is, it seems like he's pushing, you know, for his son to take over after him. And you can see in this election that is going on, those who were on the side of his son were the ones, you know, being able to get through his party and getting the ticket, because when you get a ticket in his party, that you know you are sure that you are going to the parliament, you might become a minister. So it's laying the foundation. But still, there is a lot of uncertainty in all other countries where we have seen this kind of dictatorship where leaders don't want to live out. So there is a possibility that, you know, the youth will for the case of Kenya, because Kenya, they have that history of taking part in the revolution, the Mau rebellions and all that, and also their institutions are still strong. So they shake each other, the opposition shake, and, you know, the government. So So that's why I said
Yeah.
the contexts are different, but definitely the young people will play a part in this. And I believe that for Africa to be restored, young people must, take the lead.
To both of you, gentlemen, we're going to have to end the conversation here, but thank you so much for your thoughts and your reflections on this phenomena of longevity in power. But one does get a sense that there are winds of change that are blowing across the continent, and maybe this won't be something we'll see all too often in the future. Certainly has been a history that we have seen in our lifetimes. But thank you so much indeed for joining us, Professor Chitja Twala. Thank you for joining us, and Dr. Alex Kihehere Mukiga. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter, and your team. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Peter, and your team, and the listeners. Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you very much. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And in fact, I'd like to know what your thoughts were watching. You can already comment in the comment section below. Else you can, you'll see on the screen now our email addresses and also social media platforms where we'd love to see your comments and your thoughts about what you're watching, and also importantly for us, what would you like to see more of? What kind of conversations do you want us to have, and who with? And we'll endeavor to make sure that those conversations happen. In the meantime, from me and the team, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again the next time. Bye-bye.
You are watching Channel Africa Conversations.